Welcome to the National Training Agency's webinar series. To our loyal viewers, if you know what number we're in the series, please feel free to drop the number in the comments. And if this is indeed your 27th webinar with us, you're considered the most loyal viewer. Today we have Dr. Joanne Tull with us. Dr. Tull is an academic researcher and consultant in the Caribbean creative economy development with a particular interest in festival entrepreneurship, festival statistics, cultural heritage and development, cultural industries impact and strategy. Dr. Tull is currently the academic coordinator of the undergraduate Carnival Studies program, as well as the postgraduate diploma ACEM, Arts, Cultural and Enterprise Management, at the Department of Creative and Festival Arts, University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. At the undergraduate level, she teaches the economics of culture, enterprise, internships for arts, festival management, festival projects, and cultural research methods. And at the postgraduate level, arts, culture, and society and project development. Dr. Tull is currently completing 2 manuscripts, one on the Caribbean creative and cultural economy with Deborah Hickling Gordon, and she's also working on a digital text, The Business of the Arts Cape Guide with Mr. Farley Joseph. So Dr. Tull, we are so happy that you've decided to join us. And today, of course, viewers, we will be speaking about the sustaining the carnival ecosystem, skills training, and entrepreneurship.
Thank you for having me, and it's good to be here at NTA. First time in quite a few years, but I'm happy to say that the last time I was here, we were very busy creating those standards for mass design, which are now in full effect across Trinidad and Tobago.
So, of course, we are very happy to have her, so welcome. Dr. Tull, you have been an advocate for Carnival being viewed as an ecosystem. Can you please share with us what is a carnival ecosystem and why is it important to approach carnival as an ecosystem?
Well, of course, we are familiar with our carnival, Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, as an activity. For some people, we know it's a national festival. And whether you view it as an activity, as a vacation break, or as a festival, which is where it is classified as, it is the thing that makes you feel good. Festivals are about celebration, they're about having fun, they're about making you feel good, it's about excitement, it's about showing off, showcase, performance, and so on. And in that regard, there is a way in which sometimes we overlook the fact that there are persons who are busy working behind the scenes to ensure that you enjoy that festival experience. And when we give consideration to that, of course, it means we are talking about carnival as industry. With that kind of mind frame, what has happened over time is that we would tend to focus then on what are the elements considered to make money in carnival, to put it in a very straightforward way. And in so doing, there's a way in which we would overlook that there are other aspects of carnival, whilst they may not necessarily make money or that they have to make money, they are critical to the sustainability of carnival, whether you are seeing it as an economic or industry or business concern or as a socio-cultural construct. And so therefore, it is out of that I've come to the recognition, and understanding that carnival really is much more than simply festival. It's more than industry and business, but it's really a combination of all these various elements, which include people as well, which also include systems that are operating in other aspects of our society. And so in that regard, it is perhaps more useful if we are to look at it as an ecosystem, especially when we are talking about development. And in this case, of course, we are interested in discussing human development.
Agreed. Thank you so much for that. So as we're on the topic of people and human development, I wanted to talk a lot about skills training and entrepreneurship today. So from your point of view, what are some of the critical skills required to sustain or to even develop Carnival as an ecosystem in the truest sense?
Right. So, if we are to give that identification, I suppose it would be useful for me to say how this carnival ecosystem works or what that looks like. And it's simply as we would have learned in biology for those of us who had that to do. That ecosystem is this interaction of organisms, and these organisms are very much impacted on the environment in which they are existing, and of course they in turn impact on that environment. For Carnival, that environment would be our wider society, and of course the other creative and cultural industries that contribute to Carnival, such as music and dance and theater and performance and visual art and photography, and we know the list, and it goes on, and they're all interacting with each other. And so who drives this really? People. Carnival, even though we have to come to a place where we give serious consideration to the digital economy that relates to Carnival, Carnival predominantly remains driven by people. It means, therefore, that if the Carnival is to be sustained, if the Carnival is seen as a pillar of development, we do have to take into consideration where those people lie around the ecosystem that are in need of these skills, or what are these skills. Well, I suppose we could look at it in layers. So the natural and obvious ones would be the ones related to creativity. So the creative skills in terms of giving a provision to the creative arts and the cultural arts skills that are needed to drive the carnival. Of course, all related to the very core arts that I just identified. Visual artists, of course, will be needed. You need persons, of course, to be able to design. And we have seen in Trinidad and Tobago where design for carnival, especially in the context of masquerade, has gone in the direction of fashion. But I think it is useful for me to put here, especially since we are NTA, that mass design is a specific skill. And NTA has recognized it as such with the two standards that fall in that domain. And that was something that was very much advocated by us at DCFA and UWI. The fact of the matter is that with any aspect of the creative economy, unique creative and cultural skills are necessary. And that was just one of the examples. Most certainly music, but then it's not just music in terms of performance. Music also drives many aspects of the advertising and media sector that relates to Carnival, those the production of jingles and so on. But skills beyond the creative. There's also a need for skills for persons to drive the business side of Carnival still. And we've been doing some work in that regard. We have our program, you just heard ACEM, which is towards that, building people's capacities that they can fully develop and make profit oriented or sustainable, if not for profit, creative industries, creative businesses that are very much inclined towards carnival and other aspects of the creative industries. So there's the business side of it, the support skills in terms of where we've mentioned advertising already. You need critical thinkers, you need analysts, you need project specialists. So if you notice, these are all skills that we are familiar with in other domains. And what basically I am hinting at, that someone with those skill sets can easily find themselves placed and aligned quite well within the carnival ecosystem.
Thank you so much for that. Simply because I know there's a perception in Trinidad where we view carnival as a seasonal activity or as a seasonal industry. And pointing towards holistic skills or skills that are cross-cutting across other economic activities, we see the sustainability of carnival as an industry.
Yes.
So from your research and from your experience, have you seen any new and emerging skills within the carnival industry as we are talking about digital era and how that has caused carnival to evolve?
Most certainly. I suppose that would be the obvious, but digital carnival and digital carnival economy, digital festival economy is something that is still relatively new for us. And I'm saying it like that, given the context that in the region as a whole, the digital economy is largely untapped. And so there are some primary skills that more have to do with digitization and digital business that are needed to be onboarded, that then we can see the application in the direction of Carnival. And what I mean by that simply is things like IT, which are courses that students take from as early as CSEC level. I think there needs to be a greater diversification of that broad subject now, that students can have offerings that may be of interest to them. Apart from software development, we know that there are fields such as to do with AI, for example. People have been recently contemplating how AI can impact on Carnival. I would say that our perhaps most ready inclination or movement in that direction would be the application of AI in the context of business in terms of making their business processes smoother. But as we know, AI is very much at the heart of inventing and innovating and creating new solutions at a faster pace. And of course, yes, it does have challenges for the human person, the human being, in terms of their skills being replaced. However, I think that we have to recognize as well that there are ways in which when we become competent in those particular areas, we can control that. And we have to determine as a society how far that we would go with that.
So I was just listening to you and I was wondering what were the critical skills needed for us to attain or maintain our competitive advantage. Of course, in Trinidad and Tobago 2024, we've seen headlines where there's this discourse whether or not Trinidad and Tobago is losing its position in terms of Carnival regionally.
Yes.
And so the whole issue of competitive advantage then comes into the fore. And
Correct.
so what are the critical skills needed for us to maintain
Yes.
our competitive advantage?
Well, it's interesting. One of the critical skills I believe we need is to be able to philosophize. And this is a challenge that we have always had. And it's something that we teach our students within the ACAM program. If you are to chart the course of something, you have to be very clear on who you are and what you're about and where you have come from and where you're going. So certainly for me, problem solving has to be hinged on having a philosophical outlook. It also requires critical thinking. And I think that with those two, we definitely need strategic management, strategic analytical skills. And I say that because a lot of the lamentation has to do with the fact that Carnival seems to be rudderless. Like, it's just going and, who's really in charge or who's really leading the way and what does this future look like? And so we as a people, those of us who are vested in this ecosystem in terms of that human capacity building, we have to recognize that those critical skills before you can even talk about design, which of course will always be important, event management, which will always be important, tent management, which is sorely needed, mega event management, mega event conceptualizing. I mean, all of these are different skill sets within these broad areas that we really need to encourage persons to, if not seek the training, become self-taught. And I suppose we'll get to that as well as in terms of avenues of training. But for me, the top four there, critical thinking skills, you definitely need problem solving, you need to have a philosophical outlook, and philosophy is a taught thing. It's something that requires a kind of deep contemplation. If then you are to believe in this product that you're putting forward, that you can argue and see where this can go from here to there to there. And in a sense, I understand what people are talking about because it just seems like a same old, which is where, of course, the comment about it being almost like what you see in other parts of the region is coming up. You are to be distinctive. You have to understand that first. Then you can build your marketing. Then you can articulate your USP, your unique selling point, and your unique selling position. That would make you different, a cut above the rest, with regard to others who are out there competing in the same domain as you are currently.
So I listened to you speaking about what was needed, critical skills, problem solving, even leadership coming to mind.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, can we train persons to think critically? I mean, we
Right.
live in a digital era where things come at us at a rapid pace.
Yes.
And so you're not always afforded the opportunity to
Yes.
critically analyze what you see before
Right.
the new thing comes.
Yes.
So my next question would be, based on the skills needed, what training is currently available? Is it
Right.
available locally? Is
Yes,
it
most certainly. So that very program that you mentioned, Arts, Culture, and Enterprise Management, a postgraduate diploma at my department that I am the coordinator of, gives you that. Arts, Culture, and Enterprise Management was created and designed towards giving persons who already would have had experience in the creative industries an opportunity to have a postgraduate qualification that would allow for them to even serve others. Because, of course, if we are to be consultants and to make interventions, persons who we are seeking to serve, depending on the structure, because you may be getting funding, they need to know you're qualified. But beyond that, and more directly in line of what you are asking, the program really gives you the context through which you would learn and you would harness your critical thinking skills. So, for example, a lot of what we do, and even at the undergraduate level, the courses I teach: festival management, festival projects, enterprise internships for the arts. These courses require you to go out into the society. So your course requires you to engage with persons out there. They're simulated exercises. The festival management, the students have to work in text. So in the past, our students doing that course, they've worked in Machel Montano, Machel Monday, they've done Soca Monarch, semi-finals and final, major events. This year, the class, they did Fatima College Fete and some of the cooler fete they had, as well as our very own, the Old Year, which is the traditional masquerade heritage fair that we have. When you do simulation, person has no choice but to think because it's real. It's coming at you. And of course, it is being given in a context whereby you are encouraged to be confident about your thinking. I like to say that people, it's not that you lack the critical thinking skill, it's more about confidence. And creatives have an advantage over most in the sense that they already have that strength, which is being creative requires you to be courageous, really. So it's building on that to be able then to think beyond the making of whatever, but now about how that is going to translate, how that now is going to be readily available for the market to consume. You see, so it really is a case of utilizing courses such as those that you would be able to harness what already exists within you. There's that. And the second way in which it can happen, and which used to happen a lot in Carnival, is through mentorship. Mentorship remains very important, particularly for Carnival, in the sense that when you think of how the masquerade industry was built, a lot of it was built on mentorship, persons working under established designers, learning the craft, working with them for many years, breaking away, maybe having their own bands, and so on and so forth. I think it's also critical in the context of communities. I believe a critical part of the Carnival ecosystem is the community. Community has an important role even in terms of training, because there's a lot that dwells within the community that relates to a lot of the masquerade forms that Trinidad has that can be, of course, handed on to the younger ones. And of course, as we know, if articulated properly, we can design a quality, yes, a program. And now this is something that is a standard that others, of course, can access. So mentorship is also very critical alongside what we are doing at UWI.
So there are two things that you mentioned, mentorship and also the community model. I'm very much interested in finding out whether or not that model is formalized in any way, where there are communities in Trinidad and Tobago that have resident skill sets. So
Right.
we may know a particular
Right.
community is known for steel pan, and so
Yes.
they have perfected
Yes.
the practice of tuning steel
Yes.
pans, or whether or not there are communities in Trinidad and Tobago that have perfected that wire bending art, so that we will know
Yes.
as a population
Yes.
where
We
those skill
can
sets
go.
reside, and then how we can bring that to the national
Right.
for.
So there's a yes and no within there. That's a great question. Variously, it has occurred.
Okay.
Variously. Because as you talk about the wire bending, my mind went to the Moko Jumbies, and there was a community where I don't want to misquote. I'm thinking it's Kokoreef. I'm willing to be corrected by anyone who's listening. But and then of course for sure, there's the jab from China. They were doing it for sure because DCFA, as a matter of fact, have partnered with them at some point in time. So the answer to that is yes, this has occurred variously over time. Now we're talking about it having a structure, and that is what we are missing in the sense that I believe there is need for that mapping exercise where there is the identification of the communities where these skill sets reside. You'll know it through the art forms, especially when it comes to carnival. The regional carnivals, there are about 80 something of them from what I gather. There are quite a few regional carnivals here in Trinidad and Tobago, and each regional carnival boasts a particular mass form or a set of mass forms. So wherever you go in those particular communities, that community is known. And of course, one of the more popular ones will be the Pyramid Blue Devils. And then, of course, you have the fancy sailors out of the House of Jagassar from down south. So there are particular mass forms that are already known associated with particular communities. And so we need to get to that place where it is structured and to give them the support that they need to create those programs that people can immerse themselves. And not just people from here, people from the diaspora, people from beyond who may want to access these skills. And so now we see the ecosystem really at work. So the ecosystem isn't just an operation pre-Lent, but now you see something that is going on through the year that feeds back into what will happen pre-Lent. And of course, that makes it more sustainable. It means that we are generating vocation for our people. It's not just jobs. We know vocation is still important, but vocation, as we know, can turn into profession as well. And so we create a cycle now that is self-sustaining.
So as you mentioned, formalizing, training and ensuring that we put a structure to it. I was wondering what were your thoughts on maybe a carnival school or a practical school? So I know UWI has their program, but I'm just wondering about a school where artisans and persons who have perfected their craft through experience can have the opportunity to mentor, have the opportunity to train and pass on that knowledge in that immersive environment, as you mentioned before. We need to become, Carnival if we are to evolve and, become sustainable as an industry.
I think we probably would be better with a creative industry school. I think so. And why I say that is because we know that the carnival it interconnects with a lot of the other creative arts. In terms of that immersive structure of which you spoke. And then from there, depending on your interest or specialization, you would then go to the various spaces. I mean, besides UWI, UTT has their masters in carnival studies, where you may want to engage in the research side of it on that particular level. So that if there's a creative arts school, as we're talking of here, that is this immersive experience. By the way, DCFA does that. Excuse me. So it does exist. We are the Department of Creative and Festival Arts. But if this thing is grounded in the community, which I believe is what you're speaking of, then that should be a first step. And then as you want to amp up your training, you come to DCFA, you come to DCFA, you come back to DCFA. You use the skills, the standards that are here at NTA, and in that way, we now create persons who can lead others. You mentioned leadership before. And this is really the gap that we have, It's not that we don't have the elements already. It's really that we're not connecting the dots then, as we need to be able to push this forward. So NTA has their thing over there. This thing is going on over here. But there needs to be that coming together now to create a harmonized kind of system where we all are going towards that same desired outcome, which is human capacity building in the sector.
And so then I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how do we then connect those dots?
Right.
Because the elements exist,
Right.
and it's just a matter of connecting. What is,
Right.
in your opinion, the best strategy to do
Right.
that?
I think it's really simple as send an email. We are there. We really are there. Because I mean, when you look at the work, for example, that has been done here quite well, standards have been created. I mean, my experience of that were was based on myself and my colleague representing UW as the academics, because we had already created the certificate in Carnival Arts, which is coming soon. UW is actually going to start to offer it very soon. And we worked with you all, which will be the public sector anchor, to drive the process, and the stakeholders in mass, which at the time would have been the association. So that was the community, not so. That required somebody in the community making a call. So we are at a place where the elements are there. The coming together is really about someone taking that or being given the will or the mandate to, and allowing for the process to see through, that it can come to the place where we need it to. Because we could give them the mandate, but then we know sometimes external forces kind of. But I believe if the mandate is given and they are allowed to see the process through, we would benefit from it. Our biggest strength in the creative industries in the Caribbean is our human force, right? People talk about talent, the Caribbean. There's so much creativity here. So but it's people driving it. It's not, you see. So that is what needs to be harnessed. What is within our people. Yeah.
So, as you're speaking about harnessing our greatest potential, which relies within or resides within our human capital, I was just thinking about entrepreneurship and how that can benefit our human capital,
Right.
how that benefits society. So, what role does entrepreneurship play in this ecosystem?
Right. So entrepreneurship is a very interesting area. I think I want to first say, even though of course I'm an advocate of it, that entrepreneurship is not for everybody and everybody not for entrepreneurship. I think it's very important to say that. There are persons who are outstanding creatives and we need them. They may not be an entrepreneur. And then there are persons like myself, can paint, draw, act, sing, but very much vested in the creative industries and understand what entrepreneurship can do in that regard. So that's the first thing I want to say. It is useful and it is important because of what entrepreneurship conceptually stands on. You go in that direction, it really requires of you to pull together those body of skills that we spoke about earlier. The problem solving, the critical thinking, the strategizing, marketing. You have to have some competence in financial management. Just a basic, if you don't know it all, you have someone who will advise you just as you would have a lawyer for your legal concerns and so on. But the fundamental thing for me in terms of how we treat creative entrepreneurship is that it's very much founded on the principles of project management. The understanding that everything that you do has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that within there are processes and stages that you should have those skill sets that we not too long mentioned to be able to drive it from that step one, step two, step three, of course, to your outcome. So that for me is the practical purpose of entrepreneurship in terms of how that is relevant or how that makes a difference here. But at a national scale, it's very important because then what we're talking about is that our society becoming more self-sufficient. Our society becoming self-empowered to drive their own destiny, to drive their own development, and of course to drive their own sustainability. Not that you would not need government systems and support because government has that role to be facilitative, must create policy, must create structured systems, laws, regulations to drive whatever you're doing. But what is critical about creative entrepreneurship is that it allows for that self actualization and allows them for you to take whatever is that creative force or innovation that you have and make it into a business concern or sustainable projects that would allow for you to make a difference for yourself, your community, and of course, the society.
So I was just wondering, in terms of entrepreneurship, I know that there is this perception that an artist is an entrepreneur. There is that perception, and how do you then get the skill sets needed to have a sustainable entrepreneur out of an artist?
Artists as an entrepreneur, artists perceived as hustlers. Which one?
Well, I wouldn't call.
Because hustler is not entrepreneur, but I'm more familiar with that one. I don't know that to be so. I mean, I think I understand what you mean, that people always assume that the artist is self, their own business. Yes?
Yes.
So it comes back to the training. So you see, we come right back to the importance of an institution such as this and the importance of what we do at the CFA. You could run, but you can't hide, you know. You need some kind of training. As a matter of fact, I don't want to call any names of anyone in the industry. But if there's anyone listening who familiar with my work, or they may be my client, they will know that I've said this often. I look in the industry right now and I can see the difference or the gaps between certain players. And the difference is training. Those who are is either they came to the CFA or they access some kind of other training somewhere, whether it was at UTT or whether, of course, they were being mentored. So it fundamentally comes down to the need to harness your skill set once you are looking to go on the next level. That question you asked, you talked about a successful entrepreneur.
Correct.
So if you want to be that, it really does require that there's that engagement of self with others in terms of building on those strengths that you have and trying to tweak and really improve on the weaknesses that you may have, given the necessities of business. And I want to say here as well that it's not that you are solely focused on commercialization, but living in a developing country context, you recognize that if there's to be sustainability, you got to give back. So the training also allows you to see how you could, as we were saying in Trinidad, eat a food and still at the same time you give what is necessary back to that ecosystem that is serving you.
So you've given us a lot of food for thought, and I know, of course, at the NTA we generally have a number of young persons looking on.
Right.
And of course, Carnival is an attractive industry because it's who we are as a people.
Yes.
It's also very vibrant and very exciting. But of course, we may not have thought of it as an ecosystem or even as an economic driver in its truest sense.
Yes.
What advice would you give a young person who's now contemplating, having looked at this webinar, being part of the ecosystem? And also, if there are entrepreneurs with those skill sets who would like to get into the Carnival ecosystem, what would be the best approach?
Right. So for the first group, having that interest, I think it's first of all determining where your passion lies. A few P's will come here. Determining where your passion lies. What about Carnival excites you first of all, that you believe you would have an interest in working on and working with. Once you've determined that passion, then from that, you should be able to see your purpose. And those first two things, you are never, ever, ever to let go of. Your passion and your purpose. Reason being, that is what would allow for you to keep focused. Because you have heard us talk about the training and the importance of it. But we know contexts vary. Maybe at a place where you can't necessarily access the training right now for whatever reason. Maybe financial, may not be, maybe other personal responsibilities. It doesn't mean that you let go of your passion and your purpose. Having the focus, what it means though, is that you would think of other ways in which you can engage. And that may simply be offering up yourself as a volunteer so you get the experience. Seeking out persons who you admire in the area that you have your passion. People in the creative industries are always looking for young people. always, always, always. They may be willing to have you be mentored under them, seeking out apprenticeship areas, look at the NTA standards and see who is the one offering those standards and get on board with that. So those are some of the things that you can most certainly do. So that out of the focus now, you begin to build on that towards bringing that into reality now. You keep on your focus. You don't ever let it go because there will be times when people will discourage. Sometimes you might discourage yourself because it's carnival and people think it's fun and they don't see the business of carnival as something serious. Carnival is serious business. So that in going that route, you give yourself that strong chance of being able to realize that dream. Because your passion is really your dream. And it is in that way then you can build, because you're going to get the experience working with whoever, going to school wherever, and you bit by bit, you start small. It does not matter. Don't think about what people think or say. You start as small or as big as you can, but do not go past what you cannot do, or you cannot achieve an outcome based on whatever you set out, and you will build from there.
So I actually like that. I wrote it down. The two P's of success,
Yeah,
passion and
passion and
purpose. And
purpose.
of course, that is for young persons as well as anyone
Yes,
who's on a pathway towards success.
yes,
Now, Dr. Tall, I know we're almost to the end,
yes,
but you mentioned two things,
mhm,
standards and apprenticeship.
yes,
Those things are actually two products of the NT,
yes,
right? And so I just have one final question in terms of which, of course, those two products are always driven by industry.
yes,
So if we were to develop a standard for any new occupational area or new skill area
mhm,
that is emerging, we would need industry to drive it.
yes,
Similarly, for apprenticeships, if we have an apprenticeship program, of course, we know the government of Trinidad and Tobago has offered a tax allowance
mhm,
of 150% for any employer
mhm,
or person involved in economic activity and wants to have a registered apprenticeship program,
mhm,
that they can access it through the NT and our registration process.
mhm,
So I was just wondering, from your experience,
mhm,
is that sort of appetite for learning,
mhm,
development
mhm.
residing currently in the space, in the
For
carnival
Carnival,
space?
most certainly. I didn't even know that exists, so I hope they're listening because I believe there are some entities that would certainly take up on that offer. Um, what we have is a case where we see increasingly young people are interested in Carnival, mostly on the performative side. From my experience at DCFA, it's when they come into my courses, their eyes widen because this is the other side, this is the business side, this is the behind the scenes. This is where the magic is made for people to be out there jumping up and having a good time. And you do see those who have that natural inclination towards it. Um, and thankfully, the way in which we are set up, our UWI system affords myself and my colleague, who train the students as well, Mr. Braille, the opportunity to give them what they need, that they could actually go there and work in the industry. Like you're saying, now what happens after that? Apprenticeship is very, very critical. I mean, a 3 week stint isn't, yes, it's great because Carnival is fast paced, but the kind of system of which you speak, it would be welcome. There is an appetite, I would say, and I am sure there will be interest. If we put that out there, I'm sure you would see a few entities coming forward and seeking that guidance to set up something like that because you do need a feeder in terms of employment. And as we know, a lot of our entities here also export. They are across the region, they're in the diaspora, and so there's always need for the skill set as opposed to having to hire someone and then train, which is it can be done, but we know it's difficult, which is why the apprenticeship model is so much welcomed. So yes, I mean a happy note to close on is that yes, it is something that would be desired.
So, of course, the NT is very much interested and excited to partner with any of these stakeholders,
Yes.
any organization within the Carnival ecosystem to develop new occupational standards and, of course, to be the first within the ecosystem to have an approved and registered apprenticeship. So now I'm going to look to see whether we have questions from online, and getting a no, we don't. So we just hope that the information was well received. And of course, because this is YouTube, you can always hit replay. This is information on demand. And of course, remember to like and subscribe, follow Dr. Tull because she's very informative, has a lot of information and a lot of experience in terms of carnival, festival studies, project development, and impact, cultural impact in not only Trinidad and Tobago, but of course the region as well. So thank you very much for listening. And of course, you can visit our website for more information on National Occupational Standards and Apprenticeship. Thank you very much, Dr. Tull.
Thank you for having me. It's great.